And welcome back, George Norrie with you. Daniel Perez with us after 14 years. He became interested in the subject of Bigfoot at around 10 years old by the way of a movie he said he saw at a walk-in theater called The Legend of Boggy Creek. Since January of 1998, he has published an ink-on-paper postal mail newsletter and is the last of its kind with readers from all over the planet. Daniel, welcome back. Why 14 years? What have you been up to?
I've been busy working like everyone else, trying to make a living, but it is what it is. It's been a while.
Well, good for you. How have you been?
I've been just wonderful.
Let's talk about this interest in Bigfoot, because it never waned. It got better and better and better for you, didn't it?
It's like the drug of choice.
Tell us more.
Well, like I said, or like I've written, I knew nothing about the subject of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Abominable Snowman until I saw that one movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek. And even then, I didn't think, are they asking the people watching this to think that this is real? And that's kind of what got me started. And I went to the library and started checking books out and started to realize, hey, there seems to be something to this. So that's how I got started.
In 1967, there's an incredible event that has been turned into what is called the Patterson-Gimlin film. What do we know about this?
Well, we probably know more than ever before, but let's back up for a moment. One thing that is unfortunate at this time in writing is that the camera original film that Roger Patterson shot is lost, and the camera original film of the footprints that he shot the same day was loaned out to the BBC and was never returned. And I guess a look at the BBC archives never turned it up.
Oh.
We do have copies of both. So it's kind of like the Mona Lisa is on loan and somehow there's copies, but you never get the original back. That's kind of like the situation.
Explain what the film is, Daniel, to people who have not heard about it.
Basically, two people from Yakima, Washington, or from the Yakima, Washington area, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, were out in Northern California because there had been previous reports of Bigfoot prints, large Bigfoot prints up in that area. And so Roger, being quite an active investigator at the time, told his companion or friend from the rodeo circuit, Bob Gimlin, hey, let's go down and see if we could see some of these Bigfoot tracks. And so they set on down to Northern California, the northwest corner of the state where the ocean is and just below the Oregon border. And they started patrolling the creeks and started patrolling the woods there. And instead of just seeing footprints, they came upon the footprint maker herself. And so that's essentially what it is. And they were able to get on 16 millimeter film, using a 16 millimeter Kodak camera, a film of the creature that lasts about a minute. And so and since that time, it's been about 60 years since that film was shot, it has grown up to be this cultural icon all over the world.
What do you think of the film, Daniel?
What do I think of it?
Yeah.
As I explained in my book, that having been one of the great students of the film, is that I'm 100% confident that what you see in that film is a female Bigfoot, nothing more and nothing less. And so let me explain when I say female, is that it becomes obvious when you start to watch the film carefully that it does have mammary glands or breasts that are plainly visible in the film. And, the obvious answer to that is that it's likely a female. So I'm going to go with that answer.
You make the analogy of Abraham Zapruder's film of the Kennedy assassination. which is probably the most scrutinized film ever. But this one is way up there too, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, the Zapruder film of the Kennedy assassination from 1963 is by far, by far the most scrutinized film because of what it depicts in a President John F. Kennedy being shot and killed. And so unfortunate, but in this instance, it's something that's completely unknown, and everyone, especially in the day of the internet, the day of social media, has jumped on the bandwagon in terms of trying to understand more fully this film. And a lot of work has been done to it that perhaps they couldn't have done maybe 20 years ago. One, film stabilization, because when Roger Patterson took this film, he was on the run trying to close the distance between himself and the subject that is walking on a sandbar. And so there's a lot of jiggle in the film. And what they've done is they've taken the jiggle out of the camera so you could see the subject on the sandbar much, much better. And anyone could jump on YouTube and see that film stabilized and actually slowed down in slow motion. And so you could appreciate her for all she's worth.
A fellow by the name of Bob Hieronymus claims that he was in the suit, a Bigfoot suit, and that he was supposed to be paid for it. What do you think of that story?
Well, let's back up a minute. Bob Hieronymus is still living, as is Bob Gimlin, who's from the Yakima, Washington area. And just for everyone in the audience, is that they are physically next-door neighbors across the street. I guess you could walk, might take you a minute to get from one house to the other. So they knew each other. They were all friends back in the day in the mid-'60s, late 60s, from the rodeo circuit. And because they were neighbors and Yakima was not a big town, everyone knew each other. So Bob Hieronymus claims that Roger Patterson asked him to don a Bigfoot gorilla suit to make this film, but his claim doesn't come to light till the late 1990s. And he said that Roger was going to pay him $1,000 to do this, but he was never paid. And so if you back up a bit from 1967, in Yakima, you could probably buy a house for $2,000 at the time. And so that was a considerable amount of money. And so because of the publicity it received, that Bob Hieronymus, if his claim was valid, he should have said something back in the late 60s. But there's no evidence that comes forward to indicate that he ever made that claim. It didn't come till the turn of the century, till the late 1990s, probably 1999. And he essentially went shopping with his story as to what transpired to get publicity. And since that time, a lot of people have latched onto it, and they said, oh, yeah, Bob Hieronymus, that must be the answer. The Patterson-Gimlin film must be just a man in a costume, and it was Bob Hieronymus. Now, in June of 2009, I was up at the Yakima Bigfoot Roundup, a conference on Bigfoot, and I actually knocked on Bob Hieronymus's door. I'm 5'7", and I stood not next to him, but face to face, and I would say he is at the time maybe 5'9", 5'10" at best. And so you could imagine maybe he shrunk a few inches over the years as you get older, but he's not as tall as he claims.
Yeah, because that Bigfoot in the Patterson-Gimlin film looks like it's 7 feet tall.
Yes, it's quite large, based on the feet, based on the testimony of the people who were there. And so that's the first thing, is if Bob Hieronymus's claim is to be believed, he would have to be a much taller person, and he is not. And so you would have to severely question his claim that he was the person in the suit.
What do the skeptics say about it, Daniel?
The skeptics, the doubters, are 100% convinced that it is just that, just a man in a costume. And they've gone on and have written about it, have done podcasts about it, television interviews. But here's the thing, is that if it really is just a man in a costume, then you should be able to duplicate it. And to date, no one has. And so if you stop right there on that point, is that you go back and look at science in general, you look at other examples. And I think in 1989, there were two scientists by the name of Fleischmann and Pons who claimed they were able to do cold fusion. So essentially that's what's happening in the sun, but they were able to bring it to a tabletop and say, like, yeah, we are able to do this. And other scientists got wind of it. Actually, they had a press conference about what they had, quote unquote, achieved. Other scientists got wind of this and said, hey, this could power the entire Earth for basically nothing. Let's duplicate what they were trying to do, or what they claimed to have done. And the other scientists who were trying to duplicate what Fleischmann and Pons had achieved, cold fusion, they were unable to do. So they came to the conclusion that the cold fusion was fraudulent, that what they were said that they did actually was unachievable. And so, go ahead.
Who in their right mind would want to put a costume on out in Bluff Creek, California, where you might be able to get shot at?
Yeah, at the time it was hunting season. So if you take the position that someone did, they risked an enormous chance of being shot, because there's a lot of people, not just in the woods of Northern California, but in the woods of North America, who will literally shoot at anything out in the woods. So that would be a huge risk for anyone to take.
And the shooter at the time could just simply say, I thought it was a bear or an animal. He's not going to get charged with anything, is he?
No, absolutely not. He says, I can't believe there's a Bigfoot out there. It must be a bear, so I shot at a bear because maybe it was approaching him, or whatever the case may be. But, if you take the position that it's just a man in a costume, there was a huge risk of getting shot at.
Tell us about your book, of course, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek.
Now, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, A Pictorial Discussion, is a self-published book by me because I wanted to have control of everything rather than have an editor doing stuff with it.
With his red ink pen.
Yes, exactly. And so in 1994 and then in 2003, I wrote a booklet that was 23 pages long, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek. So that I'm the author of that as well. And so that was me back then trying to write effectively about this film subject, because at the time, I don't know if you knew, but I had direct contact with two of the principal investigators of the film, Renee DeHinden and John Green. So they were colleagues of mine when in the day when people wrote postal letters. So I knew them from the late 70s. And they knew a lot about the film. And so when I had questions, they were able to answer effectively the questions I had about it. So that on the 25th anniversary in 1992, that's what inspired me to write about it, because not a whole lot was written about it, and what was written about it was essentially rehashed. And so I wrote a booklet 23 pages long, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek. And so later, much later, like January of 2025, last month, I made a decision, well, this has been going on for some time, but to publish a real book, 130 pages long with an index and all sorts of photos, hence the term pictorial in the title, about the PG film, the Patterson-Gimlin film. And this is essentially Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, the original booklet, but on steroids now, or supercharged, the supercharged version. And so this is it, and I'm very proud of it. And just yesterday I was looking on Facebook, an individual from Mississippi who had critiqued the book by the name of Henry May. He says, I'm not giving this book a 10 or an 11 or a 12. I'm giving it a 20 on a 10 scale. So I was just simply delighted, and I saw that comment on Facebook, so I was very, very happy.
I'd give it about a 25, Daniel.
Well, I appreciate that, because it's a very good discussion about a good, sensible discussion with feet on the ground about the PG film, the Patterson-Gimlin film. And so in the book, there are never before seen photos that the late George Haas took of the film site. And so people might ask, well, that's not a big deal. These are just photos. But say, for instance, you could think of an iconic movie star from Hollywood, Marilyn Monroe. And so she's fascinated the public for decades and decades. And people have seen all sorts of images of her. And then when a new image comes out, people are saying, oh, wow, we've never seen this, or we've never seen that photo. And so this is an opportunity to get to see those images. And if you were to go back in time and you could say, like, oh, I wish I could see around the corner, literally, this is that opportunity to see the Patterson-Gimlin film, which you could see on YouTube, but you could literally now see around the corner as to what's not seen on his film, but what's seen on the film site. And those photos are packaged here in this book.
How were you able to get the photos from him?
Well, George passed away. He was a chain smoker, and he passed away back in the 70s. And so when he passed away, he had an organization called, from the Bay Area group of California, he had an organization called the Bay Area Bigfoot Group, the Bay Area Group. And so one of his colleagues was Warren Thompson, and unfortunately, I guess around 2012, 2014, he passed away from Alzheimer's, and I guess he was early 70s. And so all the information that George Haas had when he passed away, Warren Thompson got. And when Warren Thompson passed away, he passed out all that information on to me. And so that makes me now the person with the largest physical files in the world on Bigfoot. And part of those physical files were slides, 35 millimeter slides that George Haas took of the film site in June of 1968 when he was there with a Canadian Bigfoot researcher, John Green, to do a recreation film of Patty on the film site. And so George was invited up with John Green. And so instead of directly participating with the recreation process, he decided to be the guy that was going to photo document this whole thing.
Well, these photos are priceless, Daniel. We'll come back in a moment and chat more about this. Daniel Perez with us. His book is called Bigfoot at Bluff Creek. And welcome back, George Norrie, along with Daniel Perez. We'll get into some other Bigfoot stories in just a moment. We'll take your calls with him next hour. Daniel, where do people get your pictorial discussion book, of course, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek?
They could just go to the website, bigfoottimes.net, to order a copy. The website's being currently updated, but you could still log on, and my email address is there, and we'll get you all squared away.
So it is not on Amazon?
It is not on Amazon. There's only one place you can order the book.
The website?
The website, bigfoottimes.net.
All right, we've got that linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. Daniel, give us your thoughts on Bigfoot itself. What do you think this creature is?
I think it's a primate that is still living, that came over the Bering Bridge Bering Land Bridge from Asia. What exactly it is, and a lot of people have speculated that perhaps it's Gigantopithecus or this or that. And I don't like to speculate because we don't know, but what we likely do know, it's a primate like you and I, and I would leave it at that. It's a giant hair-covered primate that occupies North America like we do, and very small in numbers, lives in the woods, does its own thing, and so that's part of the mystery. I think if they actually got a body, it would revolutionize the anthropological sciences overnight, because most of the people in the sciences in general do not think that something like this is out there. Yet we have countless people from all walks of life in North America who are claiming to have seen something like this, and it just happens to be that the late Roger Patterson just happened to get an extremely good daylight film of one of these things in 1967.
Daniel, is it similar to the Abominable Snowman, the Yeti of the Himalayas?
I would say probably yes. But the physical descriptions of the Yeti or the Abominable Snowman are a little bit different in the fact that it seems to be more of a rock-dwelling creature up in the Himalayas and possibly smaller. But I think if you were to do genetic analysis, say if you had one of each on a lab table right now, that the similarities or the biological similarities would be strikingly similar, maybe a common ancestor.
Has anybody given Bob Patterson, how old is he now? What do you think?
Are you talking about Bob Gimlin?
Which one's still alive?
Bob Gimlin is still living, and I believe he's about 94. To my knowledge, he has never taken a lie detector test and never has consented to one. And I've interviewed Bob Gimlin numerous times, and I have found him always to be very straightforward in terms of his answers to my questions. And so I know that Roger Patterson, before he passed away, when you got to think of it, it's a whole different era. Back in 1958, when he was interviewed by the National Wildlife magazine, magazines, books, and so forth, that was the World Wide Web then, because there was no internet back then. And National Wildlife magazine said, we are absolutely not going to do an interview with Roger Patterson unless he takes a lie detector test. And according to their magazine, in the magazine, he passed with flying colors a lie detector test, and so they went forward with their magazine article.
So it was given to somebody of the two.
It was given to Roger Patterson as per the National Wildlife magazine, and that's why they went forward with their publication on the Patterson-Gimlin film, and they did a spectacular write-up on it.
Not that we should, but why can't we seem to capture one of these creatures?
That's the million-dollar question. I don't know. There have been several people with stories of claiming to have captured one, but when you get down to it, they have no proof that this is actually what happened. And so on the 25th anniversary of my newsletter, The Bigfoot Times, I told the readers, I said, my best answer to most of your questions is I don't know, and that is the truth. And there are other people in the Bigfoot community who seem to have answers for every question, and I think the best answer sometimes is to be straight up and say, I don't know.
Are you still curious about the creature yourself personally?
Oh, absolutely. I've never had a sighting, but I have seen footprints. Unfortunately, the footprints I saw were not the best. And the first time was in 1979, 1980 in Hemet, California, when it was just basically a small town. And some people out there, the late Dick and June Putnam, had reported encounters there. So myself and a colleague went out to investigate, knocked on their door, And back then there were no cell phones, and no one was home. And so we said to one another, I said, well, now what? And we drove all this way. And I said, well, let's just go and look around in this area, just any area, and see what we could find. And so we were just stumbling around in the woods, and right by a little creek that was created by rain runoff, there were some tracks. And we kind of looked at each other like in disbelief, and because nobody knew we were coming. And so there were tracks, and that's what really got me excited. I'm saying, like, oh, look, we're seeing physical evidence of something. And so fast forward to summer of 1986, some people from the Letcher construction crew based out of Fresno, I believe, California, were building a footbridge over the Kern River, and they had reported a sighting. And somehow one of the news agencies got hold of me, and I said, well, I'll see if I can get out there. I went out there. And I was doing a taped interview about what they had claimed to have seen. And during that taped interview, they said, and it left tracks too. So I shut down my tape recorder, and I said, tracks? I said, can we see those now? And so we went to go look, and those tracks were a little over 13 inches long, but the unfortunate part, they were left in sandy soil, so they weren't clear indentations. So that was my second opportunity to see tracks. And that's when it really kind of hit me that there's something physical really leaving these tracks. And in the case up in the Monachi Meadows where they were building the footbridge over the Kern River, there were 5 grown men. They had the sighting, I guess, the day before they left the camp, which they had to kind of walk into, is that they were so scared they grabbed their shotgun and left that area because what was coming down off the mountainside had screamed. And one of the eyewitnesses explained to me that this is a direct quote. He said, it screamed so loud it was like the stadium loudspeaker 3 feet in front of you. And that's when they knew that whatever was out there that they could barely see was real, and they wanted to get out of the area.
With those who see the Patterson-Gimlin film, Daniel, what is the consensus? What do they say primarily?
You know, the consensus based on my survey is it's equally divided. There's as many people who think it's just a man in a costume as they think that this is really a Bigfoot. And that doesn't bother me because we could all have opinions about what we see on the film because it is just not a film. And so my pushback or comeback is that, okay, if it is just a costume man walking around for this film, why can't someone duplicate it or at least get in the ballpark? And no one has. And this has been almost 60 years. So you ask the question, why is it that in 1967 Roger was able to do this and we can't do this now if you take the position that he faked the film? And when you look at the film closely, you start to see these muscle masses, the expansion and contraction of the muscles underneath the hair. And it's just inconceivable to think that that is a costumed person masquerading as a Bigfoot.
What would you say is the most compelling aspect of the film to convince you that it's authentic?
I think the massiveness of the subject and the footprints that were left behind, because when Roger and Bob left that area because of the heavy storms, they decided to go back home because they had been on the road for at least 2 weeks, and they probably had to get back to work. And so they left as soon as the film was shot that evening. It rained like cats and dogs, unbelievable. And Bob Gimlin had reported that the rain was coming down so heavy that the windshield wipers on his truck were not keeping the rain off. It was that intense. And so they left the area. And so a fellow by the name of Bob Titmus, who was from Canada, came down at the end of the month to investigate because he had met Roger and Bob in Canada, in British Columbia, at one of the film showings shortly after the film was shot, to the press and to the scientific community. And Bob Titmus was there. And so he was so impressed by Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson, he said, I'm going to fly down there and investigate myself, because he had been into Bigfoot for a little bit. And so he came down, saw the tracks, and made about 10 consecutive plaster of Paris castings of the trackway. And so, to me, in addition to the film, the tracks that were filmed and then later cast is very impressive, because you see a lot of movement in the footprints, unlike an artificial foot that would just be the same stamp one after another. And everyone that was on that film site later that month could not make tracks as deep as the film subject that was leaving them. So whatever was there was extremely heavy, and no one, forget about faking the film. No one can even duplicate the depth of the tracks.
Right. What were they doing out there with a film camera in the first place, Daniel?
There were other reports in that area. You could think of Blue Creek Mountain and Onion Mountain, and that's in the Bluff Creek area. And those three areas I just mentioned are maybe 6-7 air miles away from one another. And so in that summertime, in Labor Day weekend, there had been reported some other tracks up on Blue Creek Mountain, and John Green went to investigate with his colleague Rene de Hinden. And so word got out to Roger Patterson by telephone that tracks had been reported in Northern California. And so he went to his friend and colleague, Bob Gimlin, and said, hey, Bob, we need to go down to Northern California to look at these tracks. And so that's what brought them down there, is other tracks that were reported in the area. And they wanted to see these tracks, and they wanted to film these tracks. And they got lucky. They not only got to see the tracks, but they got to see the filmmaker.
What about DNA evidence out there, Daniel?
I don't know of anything DNA-wise or environmental eDNA, environmental DNA. I don't know of anything that is persuasive in argument to prove the existence of Bigfoot at the present time. That being said, I don't know in the future that situation might change.
Wasn't Dr. Melba Ketchum trying to do that?
Yeah, but I think there was, with Dr. Melba Ketchum, there was a lot of questions about the integrity of her research. And a lot of people who have the expertise to look into her work were not entirely satisfied. And so that kind of fell by the wayside, if you will.
Yeah, she ran into some personal issues, did she not?
I think she did. And so I think, if anything, she may have muddied the waters. And I would say, nice try. Let's keep moving on until we could get clear, unambiguous evidence for the existence of Bigfoot. But that day hasn't happened yet.
Tell us about the cover of Bigfoot at Bluff Creek with the puzzles.
Yeah, and so that's I'm glad you asked. I had an artist by the name of Tim Holtrup, if I'm saying his name correct. I commissioned him to do the cover. And what you see is the same image, a photograph of a statue that was made in the Soviet Union, now Russia, that when they studied the film, they made this scale model of the film subject. And so it's the same image but turned and rotated. And I told the artist who I commissioned, I said, well, why don't you make it like a puzzle? Because the Patterson-Gimlin film is just that. It's a puzzle to a great many people, millions of people worldwide. And I said, put it so there's puzzle pieces. So the puzzle pieces need to be put back in to complete it. And so that was my thinking, and the artist brought it to life spectacularly.
Dramatic. And again, we get your book at bigfoottimes.net.
Yes.
What's the retail price?
The retail price for the people in the United States is $39.54. And so let's back up just a quick second. 39.54, and you take the last three digits, 9, eliminate the decimal, 954. 954 just happens to be the number of frames in the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Go figure, Daniel. Go figure. We're going to come back and take calls next. And welcome back, George Norrie, along with Daniel Perez, as we talk about his latest book. Of course, it is called Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, and Bluff Creek is in California. 1967, the Patterson-Gimlin film. What made you decide to write a book on the film again?
My principal reason for writing a book again, two reasons, is because of all the fantastic photos that George Haas took of the film site. I knew they needed to be shared with a much wider audience, which I'm doing. And two, there's a lot of misinformation, non-factual information that had circulated about the film. And I wanted to be that responsible author, kind of putting everything down in a written record so people can kind of see the facts.
Tell us about the book, The Making of Bigfoot by Greg Long.
I think that was published in 2004, and he basically, in my view, kind of insisted that, okay, Roger Patterson was delinquent in his bills and had borrowed money, that therefore, because of these reasons, he wasn't responsible financially, that how could he possibly get a film of a Bigfoot? And so that's, to me, the essence of his book, The Making of Bigfoot, that was published by Greg Long. And he's in my book as well because we address him directly. And some of the things that he wrote in his book about Al Diatley, who was Roger Patterson's brother-in-law, in terms of how that film was processed so quickly, because back in the day, film had to be developed. That's discussed in Greg Long's book, and he does a very good discussion about the processing of the film. And so we discussed that in my book as well. But the business about, because someone was not very responsible with his bills, that doesn't mean that you can't get a film of a Bigfoot. That's just showing that maybe you didn't have enough money to meet your financial obligations.
Was he speculating, Daniel, that it was motive for the film and he was going to try to sell it?
I think so. I think that's my read on the situation. But even after Roger Patterson died prematurely, his wife had to go to work, and she had 3 kids at the house. And so in terms of trying to make money, I guess maybe it didn't work out that well, and she had to go and work and to pay Roger Patterson's debts off.
Did Gimlin ever say if the film was a blessing or a curse for them?
I think both. And in fact, I just got a handwritten letter from him because he got copy number 3 of the book. And he said that now, I think he's around 94. He says, I'm at peace with the film now. And I'm very pleased that you did such a good job with this book.
Do you think if they had hoaxed it, Gimlin would have told you?
Yeah, even without Bob Gimlin, I think if they would have hoaxed it, it would have fell apart years ago. And I think everyone who's the doubter, the skeptic, or whatever the case may be, is that it's closing in on 6 decades. I would think that within that time, someone would have pulled back the curtain and said, like, okay, this is how this magic trick is done, yet no one has been able to do that. And so the film, year after year, has weathered every storm it's been put under.
And you say the film is lost now. Who had it originally the last time?
Well, the story goes is that before Roger Patterson died, he lent it to Ron Olson's father, who was in the film business, so they could do a documentary. And then he died, and I guess because his wife was raising 3 kids, she didn't know the exact whereabouts of it. And so the company that Ron Olson's father had, Northwest Enterprises or something like that, I think they went bankrupt. And during that bankruptcy, someone else acquired the film, and then it kind of got lost from there. The camera original film. So it's quite possibly there might be a film vault somewhere here in the United States where the film is located, but no one can put their hands on it. The last people to actually physically touch the film was actually here in Los Angeles by the late Rene DeHinden and the late Bruce Bonney. And they took the film, they checked it out, and the camera original, and they were able to make what you call Cibachrome close-up frames of the subject in the film image. And it's from those images we have some of the best images of the Patterson-Gimlin film. And that's when the film was here in Los Angeles. And it's unfortunate it has been lost now.
Do you think Bigfoot could be extraterrestrial?
No, but I know a lot of other people think that that is what is going on because we haven't got one yet. I just think it's similar to, say, like the wolverine. It's very few in number and primarily a nocturnal animal. And so there's a lot of mystique that surrounds it. And so people resort to the UFO and extraterrestrial ideas and apply it to Bigfoot. And I think, no, it just seems like a normal, natural animal to me.
What about dimensional?
No, I don't see that. I don't see that either. I just see just a normal, reclusive animal.
Yeah, I happen to take your posture, Daniel, that I think is a specimen relegated to planet Earth, and it's an animal.
Yeah, it just. I've been in the woods quite a few times, and I can tell you right off the bat, I've never seen a mountain lion in the woods with my own eyes. You and I both know they exist, but I have never personally seen a mountain lion in the woods. And this business about wild animals being close to big cities and reports of Bigfoot being close to big cities, that has been reported over the years. And just recently with the Southern California wildfires up here in Altadena, there was a 525-pound black bear that was hiding out in someone's crawl space on their house. And so people who don't know any better say, well, big animals can't be very close to big cities like Los Angeles. Well, there was a case right there just from last month.
Do you think it is more animal or more human?
That's a good question. I don't know. Again, that's my best answer to most questions is I don't know, but it seems to exhibit behavior of both, say, an animal and behavior of Homo sapiens as well. And so that is a very good question. And the reports, in terms of what people have described seeing, is almost equally split right down the middle in terms of more ape-like or more animal-like or more human-like, more people-like.
Could it be somewhat prehistoric?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's something that's been left over. And what people don't realize is once you get out of the big cities and you get into the woods, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of room to hide. And so I think they would be very comfortable in just hiding out and living their prehistoric life.
Might it be the missing link between ape and human?
Well, until we get one, that is a lively, open discussion. And again, I don't know, but because of the fact that from the behavior of what people say that they've claimed to have seen, that it may well be so. But this business about the missing link was kind of a misnomer right from the get-go in the anthropological circles. But in fact, it may well be the case that what we're looking at in terms of Bigfoot in North America might be the missing link between man and its ape-like cousins.
When George Lucas put together Star Wars, he had Chewbacca in the film, who looked like a Bigfoot, didn't he?
Yeah, but you could tell that it was just simply a person in a costume, and I think that was made, in 1977 or thereabouts.
Yeah, there's no question about that, but I mean, was it made to look like a Bigfoot?
I think so. It's got that look and feel to it for sure, and the person who was playing Chewbacca was quite tall as well, but certainly didn't have the same type of massiveness as you see in the Patterson-Gimlin film.
They called it a Wookiee, didn't they?
They did.
Fascinating. Let's go to the calls. Let's go to John in Wisconsin to get us started. Hey, John, go ahead.
Hello, George. Hello, Daniel. Several brief comments and a question, please. Daniel, thank you for your passion educating us on Bigfoot. And George, thank you for providing a platform that we can be educated.
Of course.
As humans, it can be difficult for us to think 5, 10, 15 years into the future. Many of us struggle just getting through today. When I look back 50 years ago, when I was 18, who would have thought I could have taken a credit card, stuck it into a machine, and cash would come out? And that segues to Bigfoot. I live in the far northern part of Wisconsin that is rich in Native American culture and history. The stories I hear are incredible that most of the country is not even aware of. And that gets to my question for Daniel. Daniel, do you think in the next 14 years, with a generation of younger leaders, with increased technology, with more interest, that the legend of Bigfoot will become more transparent, possibly more evidence, but more importantly, have more interest to support your great work? Thank you, Daniel. And George, thank you for taking my call.
To answer his question is absolutely yes, because I think social media and the internet is fueling it, and it could make that connectedness to that question and comments that the listener had just brought up. So yeah, it's going to be much more transparent, much more acceptable in society, because I think if you were to do a survey today, that there'd be a great many Americans that would just say flat out that, yeah, I think something like Bigfoot does exist.
Daniel,
there's just too many reports.
About what year did we start getting Bigfoot stories?
See, that's the thing, is that everyone thinks that this whole mystery either started in 1967 or in 1958 when Jerry Crew, who was a cat skinner, a bulldozer operator in Northern California building roads, they think that this is the genesis or the start of the Bigfoot mystery. But if now that we have that newspapers.com, that people have, researchers have pushed back, and you find reports that go hundreds of years before 1958. So you could push back into 1858, and you could push back even before the 1800s of written reports of Bigfoot-like creatures here in North America. So the written record is there.
Let's go east of the Rockies. Scott in Boston, Massachusetts. Hello, Scotty. Scott, you with us? Nope.
Sounds like we lost him.
Scott is falling asleep. But let's go to Cornelius in Louisiana. Hello there, Cornelius.
Hey there, George and Daniel. Daniel, they call me the God, Guns, and Gold Man, the Bible, Bullets, and Beans Man down here in Voodoo, Hoodoo, Udo, Louisiana. And I was telling Gina, our lovely call screener, and a happy Valentine's Day to all the lovely ladies out there in the Coast universe. We got what they call the Bayou Bigfoot down here, and A&E and the History Channel's been down here. It's got green glowing eyes, so I've wondered, have you ever come to Louisiana and come from Mardi Gras and everything. George, you've been playing that lovely Armour music, that Spanish, and so I've really been enjoying the show. But have you ever been to Louisiana to look for the green glowing eye Bigfoot? God bless you, George, and God bless Coast to Coast AM.
Do you travel much, Daniel, looking for Bigfoot?
I do, and in 1996 I went cross-country with my motorhome. I actually was going from Los Angeles to Atlanta originally for the Olympic Games, but on that trip I managed to stay away from the house for 6 months, and I went to Ohio and Michigan to follow up on reports, and it was fascinating by the number of people who have claimed to have seen Bigfoot-like creatures. But in terms of Louisiana, I've actually, to my knowledge, I've never been there. But yeah, I do travel and get out and investigate reports. But because I'm still your 9-to-5 guy, I do have to show up for work. But when I retire, I'll probably do more field investigations.
Tell me if you think this story is real. It came in on a call years ago. Guy said he was fishing off the side of a small little lake and caught 2 fish. He turned around and saw a Bigfoot behind him. He panicked. He didn't know what to do. He said Bigfoot looked at him, looked at the fish. So he handed over the 2 fish to Bigfoot. Bigfoot took them, looked at the man, gave him 1 back. Does that sound real?
I guess it could be. I mean, I don't know the person who has made the report, but if it was someone that I knew personally and had confidence in him, I would say, like, sure, I wouldn't have a doubt. But again, I don't know. I mean, this is someone making the claim. I don't know that person personally, so I don't know the integrity of that person. It could be.
There was a late Bigfoot investigator by the name of Peter Bering.
Yes.
What did he do? He hired a board-certified examiner to look at the Patterson-Gimlin film?
He did, and he came up with, I think, to pay him, I think, around to the tune of $75,000 to do a detailed forensic analysis of the Patterson-Gimlin film.
$75,000? Wow.
Yeah, and the person who was doing it was Jeff Glickman and his team. And so I'll read one sentence on the back of my book that is a direct quote from Jeff Glickman about the Patterson-Gimlin film. He says, despite 3 years of rigorous examination by the author, Jeff Glickman, the Patterson-Gimlin film cannot be demonstrated to be a forgery at this time. And that was in the late 90s. And so that comment still stands, is that here was someone hired deliberately to find the zipper in the suit, and he could find none.
That is truly remarkable. Once again, tell people where they can get your book, Daniel.
BigfootTimes.net, and you just go there to the homepage, and you'll see my email, and just shoot off an email, and we'll get you squared away.
Are the old books still available, too?
They are completely sold out. The first Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, I think we printed 1,000. Then we turned around and printed 4,000, and those all got gobbled up.
How about Bigfoot Encounters Past to Present?
Completely sold out.
Good for you. Let's come back and take final calls with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back, George Norrie, along with Daniel Perez, as we talk about his incredible work on the Patterson-Gimlin film. Daniel, Bigfoot is an incredible story. I have not heard anything about Bigfoot hurting a human. Have you?
Actually, there have been many reports where there have been, I would say, hurting people. But I think those instances, when carefully looked at, is in cases where they have been provoked. But yeah, I think any animal in the woods would defend itself. I mean, you see videos on YouTube where people get out of their vehicles where the buffalo live, and these buffalo, when you get too close to them, they will plow you down because they're defending their space.
Is Bigfoot a family creature?
I think so. I think they live in small family groups, and I think the situation with Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film, was probably a part of a family group that was up there living in Northern California.
Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Max in Bowling Green, Kentucky to get started. Max, go ahead.
Hey, George. Hey, Daniel. Thanks for having us on. There's a group of us in a Twitter space right now that want to say hi. Guys, you want to say hi?
Hey, George.
Hey, guys.
George.
Hey.
Hi, George.
I love it. How's everybody?
Everybody's doing great. Thank you. So we have two different questions. The first question is, if you were giving a unlimited budget, Daniel, an absolutely unlimited budget, unlimited resources, unlimited manpower, what would be your plan of attack, per se, to proving the existence of Bigfoot? You know, sky's the limit. And then the second question is for George, actually. We would like to know what your thoughts are on Paul Giamatti playing Art Bell, and if you guys are excited, and if there's any insider info you guys can maybe give us.
They're still negotiating the film. A couple different film companies are trying to outbid each other. But I think Paul Giamatti is a great actor, Max, and would play a great part of Art's story. I'm looking forward to that. We are working, if this happens, of getting Paul Giamatti on the show here to talk to him about that film. So we'll find out, but it's pretty good. But back to his original question, Daniel, if you had unlimited budget, what would you do?
If we had an unlimited budget, we would take the best technology, especially night vision equipment, and start looking in strategic areas and go for a live capture, absolutely. But even with an unlimited budget, there's absolutely no guarantee of success, unfortunately, because as you could see with the history of Bigfooting from 1958 to the present, there have been many people, including, I can't think of his name right now, Tom Slick, who financed the Pacific Northwest expedition to look for Bigfoot, and he came up empty-handed. And so even with an unlimited budget, I can't say there would be success. And, you know, it would be hard to tell a backer or an investor, say, like, well, give me your money, but I can't guarantee anything.
Right.
Because up to the present time, no one has got anything.
What about the frauds?
Patterson-Gimlin film. Go ahead.
What about the frauds that are out there trying to make money on phony Bigfoot stories?
You can't stop them because there's a platform for them now. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that submit anonymous videos of Bigfoot, and you never know who shot it, and you never know where it was shot. So those are always questionable.
Let's go to Bill in Los Angeles. Hey, Bill, go ahead.
Hey, George. I'd like to point out some strong empirical evidence that proves, I think, that film is legitimate. And I'd like to ask Daniel two quick questions, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah, Daniel, I'm a former reporter and a current teacher, and I'm really a skeptical person. But when I first saw that Patterson-Gimlin film, I think about 20 years ago, and I think I saw it on a television special that may be the one you're referring to, where somebody, a professional zoologist, analyzed some of the images and very convincingly pointed out that if that were a man in a costume, he would have turned just his head to look back instead of turning his whole body. And that was one of the things that convinced me that was not a man in a costume. And the other should be pretty obvious to people that cannot be a man, because that whatever that is, it has breasts. So it's definitely not a man, right?
Right. But yeah, how can I say this? You made the comments without the question. So if you're asking me if I think the film depicts a real Bigfoot, the answer is yes. And the business of a costume and faking it, you're not going to want to do it in broad daylight. And with most costumes, Bigfoot costumes or gorilla costumes, there's a headpiece. And the last thing you want to do is turn your head in broad daylight, because that would be a dead giveaway. And that's exactly what Patty does. And there's no seam or interface that you could detect that would say like, oh yeah, there's the zipper, there's that.
What happened to the Bigfoot creature? Did it just walk into the woods?
It just walked out of camera range because Roger ran out of film. And according to Bob Titmus, who was there later that month, it kind of went up on a mountainside where it had a clear view of Roger and Bob on the film site. And according to Bob Titmus, it sat down on some ferns, and he said there was plain evidence of where she sat and where she could see Roger and Bob down on the film site. And so she was probably inquisitive as to what they were doing, and that probably rounded out her day on October 20th, and then she probably went back to wherever she was sleeping.
Let's go to Rodney in Concordia, Kansas. Welcome to the show. Hey, Rodney.
Hi, George. Hi, Daniel. Great show. I just got a couple comments here, and I want to start off by saying that I want to believe that this is all real, all true. But I don't know if you've ever seen the 1962 film King Kong versus Godzilla from Toho Studios, Japan. But that suit looks pretty similar to Patty. Not like saying exactly, but I'm saying it's the closest I've ever seen. And in 1969, I think Stanley Kubrick has admitted that he faked the moon landing, and if he could fool everybody with that, you know, who's to say who's to say that the Patterson-Gimlin film, you know, hasn't fooled us. But like I said, I want to believe, I hope it's true. And lastly, my dad actually watched that the Patterson-Gimlin film in theaters. He watched it in a drive-in theater before the movie they were showing it.
I love that.
Okay.
Daniel, tell us again about the lie detector test taken on Patterson.
Okay, the business with Patterson is National Wildlife, the magazine, would not go forward with any published article about Roger or the film unless he took a lie detector test. And according to them, in their magazine, he passed that test with flying colors, and they had no doubt about his integrity.
Had he not passed it, they would have blatantly put it out there, right?
Yeah. But here's the thing about Roger Patterson. At this point in time, Roger's no longer with us, and he hasn't been with us since the early 70s, is you don't need Roger Patterson. All you need is that strip of film and analysis of that piece of empirical evidence. And everything you see in that film is very convincing that it is not a costumed individual. I mean, when you do close-ups of the lower portion of the body where you see the feet coming in contact with the soil, you're seeing the foot move with the toes going up in motion and moving. That is just very uncharacteristic of a person in a gorilla costume with fake feet. And so, like, when you start dissecting it and looking at it point for point, there's just too many things going on there that would suggest that this is not a man in a costume. Because, like I said before in the show, is if it weren't a man in a costume, you should be able to duplicate it, and someone could take their place in history to say, like, this is how this magic trick was done, but no one has. And so that would tell anyone who's thinking about this clearly, like, wow, maybe it can't be done. Then how did Roger do it? Who was a broke cowboy borrowing money from people. So he didn't have the financial resources to do anything like that.
Kind of reminds me of the Travis Walton story, the logger who got beamed up aboard a spacecraft and passed a lie detector test along with his cohorts.
Yeah, and there's a situation, too, in which he had multiple witnesses with him when they were out doing this logging, and those other individuals said that, yeah, this is what transpired, is just like Travis said.
Next up, let's go to Joe, Long Island, New York. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Daniel. Two brief questions. One is, For the people that have seen the Bigfoot fairly close up in the sun over the years, do the descriptions match up fairly well? And also, have birds flown away from where the Bigfoot sightings are, given that birds have been around and supposedly, technically, are remnants of the dinosaurs?
You mean where there's a Bigfoot sighting, do birds fly away? Is that the question?
In flocks, I guess.
That I don't really have any specific information on, so I don't know if I could effectively answer that question. What was the first question?
Yeah, I just want to ask, you've talked to numerous people that saw Bigfoot. Are they fairly close in their descriptions, or does it vary widely in what they're seeing?
Mostly, the descriptions are in line with one another, but you have to realize if you were an alien on this planet and you were dropped into the city of New York or Los Angeles and you were just observing people, you would say, like, my goodness, there's people that are bald, fat, small, tall, and so the variety of the same species is numerous. And so that may well be the case with Bigfoot in the sense that one size doesn't fit all. There's a whole different not different types, but different appearances.
Daniel, if you had to bet the ranch, would you say Bigfoot was authentic?
Absolutely. 100%, 1,000%.
Would you say the same about the Patterson-Gimlin film?
I'm the same position on the film, because after almost 6 decades, if this were a fabricated film, someone would have pulled it apart. And with the technology we have to do film analysis, I think it would have come apart at the seams a long time ago. But no one has been able to do that. And there have been several very competent people, such as the late Johannes Prohaska, who looked at the film and told a documentary filmmaker at the time in the 70s, he said, if that is a costume, that is the best costume I've ever seen. And he was the guy that used to play gorillas in movie and serials, television serials such as Gilligan's Island and Here's Lucy and stuff like that. And Bill Munns as well, who was part of the Hollywood industry who did costumes as well, came to the conclusion that what you see in that film is not the result of someone masquerading in a costume, and that what you see is biologically real.
Next up, let's go to Mark in Roseville, California. Hey, Mark, go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, George?
Good.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, how long has Bigfoot, Sasquatch been in the dictionary?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. Probably since the late 50s, when it came to light in a newspaper article after Jerry Crew's report of the finding the big tracks, and that's when the term was coined, Bigfoot, which was started as 2 words but later compounded as to 1 word. So I would suspect Bigfoot in the dictionary may have been started in the late 50s or early 60s.
Where did Sasquatch, the name, come from?
Sasquatch is a Native American term that the Native Americans in North America have used to describe Bigfoot. And I think it specifically originates from the province of British Columbia.
So what will be the big break, Daniel? What do you think?
I think there are no big breaks at this point in time, because it's gone on so long that the only thing that's going to satisfy the question of the Patterson-Gimlin film and Bigfoot in general is a body. And until that time, it's an open question. That's just the way I see it.
And not a costume filled with deer guts.
Yes, that was 2008 when that happened.
Yeah, that was not a fun joke, was it?
Yes.
Daniel, keep in touch. Once again, where do people get your book?
BigfootTimes.net, and you go right there to the top, send an email, and we'll get you all squared away with a book.
Do you sign them?
if they wish.
Perfect. Thanks again. Daniel Perez, last on the show, 2011, 14 years ago. Wow. For Dan Gallanti, Gina Salvati, Tom Danheiser, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Alec Fernandez, Stephanie Smith, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Richard Serrett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.